Hello everyone. A few years ago, someone I knew unfortunately took their own life. Now, the person that I'm talking about worked in the City of London at the time and was earning in excess of £250,000 a year, which equates to $400,000 a year. The reason why I'm mentioning their salary is important here is because the reason why they took their own life, unfortunately, was because of financial stresses and financial worries. Begs the question, why somebody with that level of income, which places them definitely in the top 1% of earners in the UK, takes such a drastic action? This clearly wasn't a case of having insufficient money to put food on the table or to effectively even have a very decent lifestyle with holidays and cars and house, etc. But clearly something else was going on. Now, begs the question that actually financial success is not only determined by the income that you make, it is determined by other factors as well. And from my point of view, there are two factors that come into play here which are extremely important. Number one, how you perceive your success to be. Do you consider yourself to be successful or not? Or are you actually already always looking at someone else or some validation from society and therefore trying to climb that next ladder of financial sort of independence or financial increment to consider yourself successful? And number two is, what are your spending habits? You could be earning a large sum of money, but if you're spending more than you're earning, you will never be financially successful or you will never be financially free. Therefore, it's extremely important to understand the signs where you might be financially more successful or more at financial ease than you might be considering. And even if you're not, you need to be working towards these objectives. So what I will talk about in this video is what I think are 7 critical things that you need to understand to make sure that you effectively are either meeting these objectives of financial independence or getting towards financial success, or if you already have these in your life, then you might be more financially successful than you might consider yourself. My name is Omar, and on my channel, I share with you my insights related to personal finance and life matters in general. If you like the contents of this video or my channel in general, please subscribe. Now let's dig into what these 7 things are. Number one, what I call number one things is that your wealth is accumulating over time. You need to be patient when accumulating wealth. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes years. However, if you're heading in the right direction, which means your assets minus your liabilities is a number that is growing, you're accumulating more assets and your liabilities are going down. Liabilities mean debt or anything that you owe to the world. An asset means that anything you genuinely owe without having a debt in its place. So if your assets minus your liabilities are actually growing over time, that clearly means that you're heading in the right direction. Number two, you have a saving. Whether it's in a bank account or it's another place, you either have 1 month, 3 month or 6 month or have a sum of money, but you have a sum of money that is saved and tucked away in case you might need it on a rainy day or an emergency situation. Now, ideally, the benchmark is that you need to have 6 months of saving or 6 months of your expenses in your bank account in case something happens and you need to rely upon that saving. But I wouldn't make that the end of the world. If you have a limited sum of money in your bank account and you're growing it over time, that is a fantastic indication that you're financially more successful than you might be considering yourself already. Number 3 is that you actually have a pension plan. You're putting some money in a pension and your pension is growing over time. So by the time you reach your retirement age, you would have accumulated a pretty decent sum of money. That is a great indication that you're actually working towards financial success and you're taking financially sensible decisions. Number 4 is that you're effectively paying your debts down. You either don't have a debt, or in case even if you do have debts, you're paying them down over time. Debt, from my point of view, if you exclude the mortgage, because most properties in the Western world, or actually some properties in the Western world, are financed by a mortgage, the rest of the money or the rest of the debts, I consider them as proper debts that one needs to get rid of. Car loans, student loans, credit cards, in particular, are all debts that we need to effectively either avoid or pay them down as quickly or as soon as possible. Particularly, I would talk about what I termed credit card, which is effectively a great instrument if you can afford to have one, or a very toxic instrument if what you're doing is spending money on your credit card and paying down just a minimum sum of money every month basis. What that means is that you're effectively buying things that you genuinely can't afford to, and you're using credit to buy those things. In my case, I never use credit card to effectively take credit, but just as an instrument of payment, and that will be automatically cleared at the end of every month. If you can't afford to use credit card where you're effectively paying it down almost completely every month, then please do not use credit card, because it accumulates over time, and before you know it, you're in a spiral of debt already. So from my point of view, paying debts down is a pretty good indication that you effectively are heading towards financial success, or you're financially much better off than you might be considering yourself already. The fifth thing that I'm going to talk about here is that your budgeting skills are pretty good. You understand your income, you understand your expenses on a monthly basis, and other than one or two odd occasions where things might go out of control because you have an expense that you didn't think of or it was completely unanticipated, you're generally making more money or equal money than your expenses, and therefore at the end of every month you're not worrying about spending the last penny. And that is a pretty good indication that your income minus your expenses are in control and therefore you're budgeting. I think everybody needs to be aware of budgeting. I've seen a lot of families have no idea on what their expenses look like, whether it's in the form of subscriptions that are going out of the bank account or the Amazon bills or the eBay bills, just keep adding up and adding up and adding up. And therefore, they have no idea on what their monthly expenses look like. It's a very good idea to have a budgeting tool in place, or at least have a simple spreadsheet that tells you this is the amount of money that came in this month and this is the amount of money that went out. You do that over 3 to 6 months, I guarantee you will find one or two things that you would stop spending money on, and that will effectively save you more money over time. The sixth thing that I think is extremely important is how do you define your relationship with money? I class a relationship with money in two ways. Number one is a healthy relationship with money. Number two is an unhealthy. A healthy relationship with money is when you're using money as an instrument, as a tool to emancipate your life, to gain more access to things in life, to effectively better your future, whether it's your children, yourself, and accumulating assets over life. And an unhealthy relationship is when you're using money as an antidote to kill either your depression or effectively buy things that you cannot afford, and you're trying to either impress the world or what I call as vanity spending, and you're playing what I call the social game, or the game which is not a game that is to satisfy yourself or your family, but a game that is to satisfy somebody else. And the problem with that kind of game is that you can play it for the rest of your life, but there will always be somebody who will want you to achieve something else, or there will always be somebody who will effectively be earning more than you or will have better things than you. So if you fall in that trap, you will get addicted to it. The dopamine will keep kicking every time you buy something, and you will end up replacing one item with the other, keep buying more and more stuff, which effectively will be useless over time. But effectively what you would have done is you would have developed an unhealthy relationship with money at the time.
And the last thing that I wanted to talk about was an attempt to diversify the sources of income. Now, most of us are either holding down a job or in some sort of self-employed business, but it's quite important to think about diversifying your source of income, particularly as life progresses. Now, income is generally generated in 2 or 3 different ways. You either extend your skill, you extend your time, and more often than not, you exchange a combination of both, which is your time and skill in exchange for money. Or the third way is to exchange an asset. So there are plenty of ways you can generate additional source of income. And I know it sounds easier said than done, but everyone needs to rely upon some sort of unfair advantage, some sort of skill that you might have, which you might be able to trade off against money. It might be writing or doing something online, or it might be buying a property and putting it up for rent if you can afford to do such, renting your car out. There are plenty of different ways you can bring in additional sources of income, which over time will accumulate and effectively make a pretty big difference on your financial outcomes. So from my point of view, it's quite important to think about diversifying your sources of income and generate a little bit of cash here and there, generate more money as time is progressive, which is not reliant on your primary source of income. Just in case, God forbid, if you lose your job or the business is not performing well because of recession or other pressure, at least you have something else to rely on. So these are my 7 best tips in terms of considering whether you're financially successful or not. If you have most of these, then you might be more successful than you might consider yourself already. And if you're not feeling good about it, it might purely be down to societal pressure or peer pressure, which, to be honest, I wouldn't pay much attention to if I was in your shoes. So if you like the content of this video, please share, subscribe. And for more content like this, stay tuned, and I will see you next week. Thank you very much.